GCSE Citizenship is basically a new subject. You have studied bits of citizenship in PSHE, so when you've done things like the environment, crime, when you have done political parties, anything like that, that has been citizenship. It just wasn't labelled it quite as clearly. So what you're going to do in GCSE Citizenship, we will have a look at now. So these are the 4 units that you study. We usually study politics and participation first. It's the most difficult unit. The reason why I study it first is that means you learn it right at the beginning. You then have lots and lots of time to be retested on it, and you've got lots of time to revise it as well. I also find it kind of sets the other units up quite nicely. If you are still on lockdown in September, I won't be sending you this as work to do. We'll start with Life in Modern Britain, which is the easiest of the 3 units, so you haven't got to worry. Okay, so politics and participation, what it is then. It's all about Parliament and government, where the power lies within UK society. So we look at things like local councils, national government, what do they do, how do they do it, how do you get into those positions, how you can protest, how you as an individual can make a change. We look at how we elect people and different voting systems, whether they should be changed, voting debates, should 16-year-olds be allowed to vote? Should prisoners be allowed to vote? And we have some debates on things like that. We look at something called the British Constitution. How is the UK put together? So things like the fact we've got police, we've got a Queen, we've got judges and all those kind of things. We've got something called devolution, which is where power has been shared. So Scotland, even though it's part of the UK, they've got their own parliament. They can make a lot of their own decisions on things. Should that go even further, or should that be stopped? Tax, how do we raise our money and what does it get spent on? That's really important. The budget is where it's decided where the money's going. Welfare, should we be paying for the more vulnerable in society? How much should we be paying? What's fair to keep society going? And the legislative process, how do we make laws in this country? Is it fair? Is it democratic? We then look at case studies of how these have been put into practice, and to get your high marks you need to be able to evaluate and analyse the democratic process. The second unit we look at is rights and responsibilities. This tends to be everybody's favourite one, and this basically is human rights and the law. So we look at the evolution of human rights. We go back to the Magna Carta and we look at the development since then and how human rights have come along. We look at the law and the legal systems within the UK. So we look at things like, why do we need laws? What are the laws at different ages? Should any of those possibly be changed? We look at the different types of law. So civil law and criminal law. What are the differences? What types of courts would you go to? Why do young people get involved in crime? What kind of crimes do they do? What kinds of sentences or punishments do they have? Is it fair to put teenagers in prison? Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? We look at the reoffending rates, the types of criminality. Why do people become criminals? Is it just the fact that they get caught? So we'll look at all those kind of things. What have the government done about crime? What crimes are going up and why? And also we look at punishment. What's the purpose of it? Why do we bother doing it? Who are the judiciary? How do you become a judge? Is that fair? We look at crime statistics and also trade unions. Who are they? What do they do? What are their powers? And also the police as well. And again, you need your knowledge of that, you need case studies of that, and you need to be able to evaluate, still can't say it, and analyse those things as well. Next unit is Life in Modern Britain. This one tends to be the easiest one. So we look at identity, culture, communities, immigration and arguments around it. We look at how the government have responded to some of the more fractious or conflict within society. We look at international disputes. How can the UK get involved? We look at the problem of refugees, and we look at how the media can be biased and what its responsibilities are. We look at media influence. So, for example, some of you might watch Good Morning Britain. Piers Morgan has just received, I think it was 50,000 complaints about the way he's acting over the coronavirus pandemic. But is it having an impact? Is it making a difference? We look at international organisations, things like the UN, things like the G8 and things like that. Should the UK be part of them? What's our role within them? And we analyse all of that. We look at NGOs like Save the Children and the Red Cross. What do they do? Why are they important? And how the UK impacts on all of those. Again, you need case studies and an evaluation. The last topic tends to be everybody's favourite, and this is active citizenship. So, what you need to do with this, you will work hopefully in a group. You can work by yourself if you want. You then go out and decide on a topic you want to research and you want to campaign on. You've got to decide why, and that's a big part of it as well. Why is it important? You then go and research this topic, so it involves secondary and primary research. You have to evaluate your research. Is it useful? Is it reliable? You then go and do something. So in the past, we have had young groups of people who've campaigned on changing the voting age to 16. They've done all their research. They've then gone out and made online petitions. They've contacted their MP. They've invited their MP into school to face question and answers and all those kinds of things. We've had people look at domestic violence and sort of investigate the government's response to it. They've gone out and helped in a domestic violence refuge. They've put on a load of charity events, raised money and provided emergency parcels for those people who are victims of that. Homelessness is another big one. Why is it happening? How has it gone up so much? What are the government doing? And then groups of our students have gone and volunteered with charities in soup kitchens and raised money for them. It's really up to you. It's all about the decision making, the research, the actual activity, and then analysing your impact. Okay, so your GCSE exam questions then. It's quite straightforward, to be fair. There's 1 and 2 mark questions, and these make up quite a lot of the paper, to be honest with you, about a third. These are all based on knowledge. You cannot possibly fake this in the exam. You can't just waffle on. You've got to know your stuff, so you've got to do your revision. So your 1 mark questions might be multi-choice. The kind of command words, name something, explain something. If it asks you to identify and explain and it's a 2 mark question, you've got to do both, okay? But your 1 and 2 mark questions, really straightforward, purely knowledge. The next set of questions are your 4 mark questions, and again these do make up a sizable chunk of your exam. There will always be a source, and the source will usually tell you about a process that happens in another country. You do not need to know this off the top of your head, you just need to know the UK's version. You use the source and you compare it to the UK. So in a 4 mark question, you will always have 2 paragraphs, making 2 clear points, fully relating it to the source, fully relating it to your own knowledge, and extending on that, explaining what you're on about. The last type of question is your 8 mark question, which is your essay question. So, for example, it says here, the age of criminal responsibility should be lowered, considering a range of views. To what extent do you agree or disagree with this statement? So basically, the age of criminal responsibility at the moment in the UK is 10. Do you think that's too high or too low? You do arguments for, arguments against, and a justified conclusion. But it's the depth of those arguments. You really need peel paragraphs. So you make your point, you need some evidence, so you need case studies to back it up. You explain how that shows what you're on about and link it back to the question. The other thing you really need to know for GCSE citizenship is British values. They are the core of the GCSE citizenship schedule. So if we have a look, our 4 British values, our first one's democracy. That's all about people having power, the fact that we're allowed to vote. Politics and participation is centred on this. The next one is the rule of law and rights and responsibilities is clearly linked to that one. Mutual tolerance and respect is really close to our life in modern Britain. And individual liberty, you get to choose your active citizenship. You can have a voice, you can be an active citizen and an active participant in society. They all interlink, they're all sort of joined and bits go into each of the ones, but quite clearly they are labelled as each of the topics within citizenship. And you do need to refer to them in your exam answers as well. The last thing I've got on here for you is the subject-specific vocabulary, the Tier 3 vocabulary. I'm not going to go through each of these with you, but feel free to press pause, have a look through. You can do yourself some testing in preparation, you can learn some. I don't expect you to learn them all whatsoever. However, have a look through, see if you can recognise any of them, and just see what you think. There's quite a few on here you might have heard of already. These might come up as 1 and 2 mark questions in your exams. So if you can get a head start on learning some of them, that's going to benefit you massively. I really hope you enjoy GCSE Citizenship. It is a brilliant subject.